The Cleveland Cavaliers select Evan Mobley.
Has been a historical franchise in this league for years.
We have a trade to announce. The Boston Celtics select Jason Tatum.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. It's been a busy day in the NBA already. We had that big Clippers-Blazers trade, which we broke down on our previous video. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure you guys go check that one out. But now, let's move on. We had another big rumor that came out today. In fact, came out while we were recording. The Nets, the 76ers, James Harden for Ben Simmons. Is this actually going to be happening? Reporting from Shams Charania sounds like we may not have to wait until the summer. This could be a move that takes place before next week's trade deadline. Keith, my oh my, the NBA just keeps on giving.
It's great, man. Trade deadline week is fantastic. Even when stuff doesn't happen, the idea of the, is super excited to, it's stuff is out there and it's so much fun. So yeah, you can watch my probably over the top reaction and be all, crazy. But I get so excited when this broke in the middle of us talking about a trade that's actually going down. But this is just, it's crazy. You have a team that was the favorite, the co-favorite at worst coming into the season, is now one of their stars can't play in home games and one of the other stars is hurt and the third star may be getting traded. Like, that is absolute bananas stuff for the Brooklyn Nets. And I mean, if the Nets are open to trading James Harden, that 100% tells me that the Nets they know they're going to lose him this summer. Like they just, for whatever reason, they know that's going to be a problem and they're not going to have him going into next season. And that says, yeah, then maybe you do it now. And that doesn't mean Ben Simmons is going to the Nets, but that opens up 3-team trade-up possibilities. It also opens them up to really push Philly and say, we want this and this and this. Otherwise, you know what? We'll trade him to Cleveland. And then you got to deal with Cleveland. If that's, where we want to go, that's where, where it'll all come. So I think this is absolutely fascinating because this is like a game of chicken now between these two franchises of, you want him, you better pay. And on the flip side, you have Philly saying he's coming here anyway, so we're not going to give you the farm for him. But all right, but you're going to give somebody the farm for him. So yeah, I can't wait to see how this one plays out.
So from a leverage standpoint, like, I understand why the 76ers would have some incentive to do this now, right? The 76ers, they can do this now. Keith, you've been saying this probably in your sleep at this point. It is and I forget the exact phrasing you use, but it's a player that is providing nothing for you this season.
No production loss
trade, right? So Ben Simmons is giving you 0 for the 76ers right now, and you can replace that 0 with James Harden, right? Your odds of winning a championship just got significantly better if you can pull this off. So the 76ers doing this now makes sense.
Hey, I'm going to jump in real quick, while also weakening the odds for a direct competitor in the same conference.
Yes. Yep. And that's also significant, right? So why do the Nets do this now? Is the 76ers offer going to change that much compared to this summer? So that's what I think is the most fascinating piece. I mean, besides just, holy moly, like this, we were kind of preparing for Ben Simmons isn't going to be traded. They're going to wait till the summer. Now we've suddenly got to, oh my gosh, this could happen now. He could be traded. James Harden could be traded by the trade deadline. There's all of that excitement, but it still drills down to, what is the incentive for the Nets to do this now?
Yeah, my guess is this is our last chance to trade him with control being in our favor to some extent, at least, because either we extract a massive return within reason from Philadelphia, or we trade Harden somewhere else. And you know what, you may have another team that says, hey, we don't necessarily care if he leaves next summer. He could boost us to a title this year. and we're fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's how it'll play off. My guess is if a Harden trade happens, he goes to Philly, whether Ben Simmons and whatever else lands in Brooklyn or not. Maybe that becomes a 3-team trade and other stuff goes to Brooklyn. We'll see. But that's my guess, is because I don't know that anybody is so much a James Harden away from us saying, holy crap, they're now the title favorite, that they can afford to make a 1-year play on him, just knowing what it would cost to get him. But yeah, if you're the Nets, what gets tough now is, can you walk this back at this point? Can you say like, no, we're actually going to keep him?
Mm-hmm.
Like that gets really hard unless they come out sometime within the next few hours today, with whether it's direct or with reporting saying, hey, we're not open to trading James Harden. We're not doing that. Or you see Harden say, look, I don't want to go anywhere else. That's tough, man.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes really, really hard to walk this back now that it's kind of out there, like, hey, we're going to listen to offers for him.
That is difficult. That is difficult. That's a difficult thing, not just for, okay, what do we do here in terms of the roster, in terms of, okay, he knows that we were considering trading him and all that kind of stuff, but that creates awkwardness in the locker room, creates awkwardness between the player and the front office. It's not an easy thing to do, right? To step back from that. So that's certainly something that we need to keep an eye on. Is that going to happen? Are we going to see the Nets come out and say, no, 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 even if it's disingenuous? We see this happen a lot, right? We saw it with De'Aaron Fox. The rumor hits De'Aaron Fox might be on the market, and then the Kings went, what? No, we love De'Aaron Fox. We would never trade him. That's just kind of par for the course for NBA teams. We'll see if that's what the Nets do here. If not, and if it's pretty clear that they are going to move on from him, we'll see what they can get. I think if you're the Nets, you have to believe, number one, that what you can get now is a lot more than what you can get in the summer. And I also think you have to believe that whatever it is that you get now, whether it's Ben Simmons, whether it's something else, whatever you get now is something that you can win a championship with, because you can't make this trade for, like some teams would make this trade and get future picks and things like that. You can't do that if you're the Nets. Mm-hmm. You need to get pieces that can help you win right now. So you have to be convinced that whatever you get right now does not diminish your title odds, particularly in the eyes of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. So it'll be interesting to see the way this all plays out. But again, I'm curious to see what this deal looks like because of the leverage. Because the Sixers, like you said, can say, well, he wants to be here. We'll wait until the summer to do this, and we're not going to give up that much. But they also have incentive to do it now. But the Nets also have incentive to wait. Like, you can go back and forth with this leverage thing. This is where the overall skill of the general manager and the front office in terms of their negotiating ability will be a factor in how this
huge.
Looks. Big time.
Yeah, 100%.
Big time. Probably more so than in a normal trade.
Yeah. Here's the other thing too. The Nets have lost 6 in a row. Mm-hmm. They may be starting to say, all right, this isn't going to work the way we're put together anyway. So we need to look to do something different. That could be, where they think this has to go ultimately. So that's one part of this, right? And maybe that, I'm not saying I've heard anything, because I will say I have not. But do they maybe know KD's not going to be as close to coming back as he is? They may be saying, hey, we know we're not going to have Kyrie for any home games. Like, nothing's changing in that situation. And maybe they are, hey, if we can reset a little bit here and figure stuff out that makes us not a huge step back this season, but, this is why stars don't get traded to other good teams in the trade deadline. This is why it's usually, if a star gets traded at the trade deadline, it's from a bad team to a good team, because then the bad team is just piling in assets and resetting. We don't, stuff like this would be pretty close to unprecedented to see something like this, because this is two teams that, with no changes, have to feel at least somewhat good about their chances to make the finals, just with how open the Eastern Conference is. And now you'd be saying, hey, we're going to make a major trade that's going to swap things and upset everything. That's just absolutely bananas to me with that. It's just so crazy.
How big of a factor does that have to be in this? If you're the Nets and you give the 76ers James Harden, and now you have to go through the 76ers and James Harden in order to win a championship.
Yep.
Like that's got to be a big piece of the thinking, right? It would be like but way back in the day, and I'm sorry I always go Lakers here, but it would be like way back in the day when Kobe Bryant wanted to be traded. It would be like if the Lakers were looking at offers from the Sacramento Kings, right? Who were the neck and neck with the Lakers. And there were a number of times where if the Kings had made it out of the West, they're probably winning a championship, right?
Yep.
It would be like if the Lakers were looking at trading Kobe to Sacramento.
But without getting Chris Webber back.
But yeah,
right,
right, exactly.
Right? Because that's what's happening here. It's trading him to the Sixers, but you're not getting Joel Embiid. You're getting, and that's what,
Simmons,
again,
maybe.
Why this is unique is you're getting Ben Simmons, but that is not a loss for Philadelphia right now. Right? Like that's what makes this so crazy. Every once in a while, you see a team with a massive contract on their books for a player that doesn't play anymore, whether it's injury related, skill related, age related, whatever. Houston Rockets and John Wall, whatever the case may be, right? But this is a guy who was an all-star, all NBA, all defense level guy. And he's just sitting there as a massive salary match, but also a really good player that's not playing for a very specific reason of he doesn't want to be on that team anymore. Like that part is so beyond anything we've ever seen. That makes this completely unique, right? Because Philly would look at it and say, as you said, we improved our odds massively and we subtracted very little from our team as it stands over the first 50 plus games that we've played this year. Just crazy. Do we want to move on to the Simmons stuff in this report from Tom's that's not related to Harden and the Nets? Or do we have more to go through on the side?
No, I think we do need to get into the Simmons stuff, but I do have one last thing here because we frame everything in kind of behind the scenes type stuff, right? Reading between, most people just see the headline and then go, James Harden for Ben Simmons or whatever it is, right? We keep asking the question, where's the information coming from? Who benefits? Yeah. So in this situation, this feels like a very pro 76ers thing that's coming out here, because if other teams are suddenly hearing, holy crap, the 76ers might get James Harden right now, and you're the Wolves or whoever else might be trying to trade for Ben Simmons, that's probably got you picking up the phone, right?
Yeah, so let's get into that part for a second at least, because in general, I almost always would agree with you on that. But there's a line within Sham's reporting that says it would be weird for this to come from the Philly side.
Okay.
And it comes after a paragraph where he talks about the 16 games Durant, Harden, and Kyrie have played together, which is bananas that it's only been 16 games. They're 13-3 and they've looked great. But the availability of all three to play together, that is in question. So that's kind of the preceding paragraph. Then the line is, but beyond availability, sources say there have been growing concerns over Harden's playing style, one of dominant ball handling in his own pace from his MVP and All-NBA days in Houston that contrasts with the free-flowing organic approach from his two co-stars. Next, coach Steve Nash has met with his team stars over finding the balance and most beneficial styles, and although there have been bright spots, too often the team has reverted to a more dry offense at the end of games, especially against the league's elite teams. And then he goes on to explain they also kind of play two different styles of offense, one when Harden's on, one when Harden's off. If Philly leaked that becomes almost irresponsible reporting. Correct. Because Philly shouldn't have those details. It's not something Philly should know. If that is coming out of the Nets, that to me says, why are we putting this out there? And that's where it just becomes a question. Unless you're basically saying, hey, you know what? Harden's available. Open market this thing. If it's Philly, great. If not, let's see where it goes. Let's get into the Simmons stuff because he had a couple more updates. Ready?
Yep, let's do it.
I queued it up.
The Simmons siren.
Went to it. Because this is now Simmons time. So the Simmons updates from Shams are, across the league, the Simmons market has become more focused as the deadline nears. Now, remember, we've been telling you guys, a week out from the deadline, that's when stuff gets serious. You've kind of played the back and forth a little bit. Things starting to tighten. You know who's out. You know who's really in. You know who might be serious about getting a deal done. The Atlanta Hawks have been most engaged with the 76ers in recent weeks, according to sources. Sides have discussed a framework around John Collins, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and draft compensation. Next line, Sacramento Kings, meanwhile, have made clear that they have moved on. That reporting is probably close to a week old now, and we know that. The next line, which this one kind of blew me away because I think it's getting lost in the whole side of James Harden. I'm getting excited. Now I'm getting the hiccups. I'm getting so fired up. The Minnesota Timberwolves have remained in conversations with the Sixers. My favorite destination for Simmons go all the way back to last summer. I've been hammering that one, but are unwilling to meet Philadelphia's high threshold for draft picks. Minnesota has discussed an openness to discussing has indicated an openness to discussing a package that includes Simmons and Tobias Harris. That's $70 million of contracts. But that offer would not come with the draft capital from the Timberwolves, and the Sixers do not view both players as part of a salary dump trade. That's where it gets super interesting, because if you're Minnesota, if you can get to that $70 million somehow without Towns, Russell, or Edwards, because they're not going anywhere, that starts to become something to really look at. Because now you give me Towns, Simmons, Harris, Edwards, and Russell, I'm feeling pretty good if I'm Minnesota. I'm really, really expensive, and I've got to figure that out down the line. But you just sold the team. New owners love to make a splash, and they'll come in spending money left and right. And, so that's not just a throwaway line. That's not just in there to be in there. There's no, that says to me, maybe there's a 3-team deal here where Simmons doesn't go to Brooklyn. Harden still lands in Philly. Maybe Simmons goes to Minnesota and Brooklyn ends up with a bunch of depth or something like that. So my ears are perked up. I'm now really, where are we going with this? That starts to become super interesting.
That is indeed interesting. And I do love the landing spot for Ben Simmons. And I also think, based on what the Clippers did earlier today, the Minnesota Timberwolves have that much more incentive to try to get something done. So, the NBA, things don't happen in a vacuum. So perhaps this is kind of what's going to ultimately grease the wheels and get something done here. It is interesting. I do wonder though, Edwards obviously not going to be in the deal. If D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, of course, not in the deal. If you say D'Angelo Russell's also not in the deal though, what is it? Beasley? That's what we're...
It's Beasley, Prince, Patrick Beverly. You're putting it all together.
We're all fine.
Hold on. Now you're making me do math, but I'm not complaining. I like math. All right. Beasley, Beverly. Basically it's going to be everything that's not
Towns, everything that's not nailed Russell down, right? They're going to be sending out. But my point is, if you're the Nets and you're in a 3-team deal and you're trading away James Harden and you're getting Beasley, Prince, and maybe you get something from the 76ers or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that enough to forego having your big 3 for the playoff run and make the 76ers now a major obstacle, an even bigger obstacle on your path to a title?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, to round back to that, if you're the Nets, if we're losing them anyway, we gotta let's start sorting. If I was the Nets, just take Simmons.
Yes.
And figure it out, right? I plug Simmons in next to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. You got to be able to figure that out. Come on.
Let me ask you this, Keith. Ben Simmons, knowing his flaws on the offensive end in terms of shooting, can you think of 2 better star-level players to put next to him than Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving? Maybe on the Kyrie side,
and Klay Thompson.
Right. Yeah, but that's what I mean.
That's it.
Yeah. You've got 2 of the best shooters in the NBA. Isn't that exactly what you would want to put next to him, at least on the offensive end of the floor? And then defensively, he's fantastic.
Yep. Yeah. This is a Nets team that in the playoffs last year, and this is not a slight at this player at all, but Bruce Brown was playing major minutes for the Nets in their playoff run last year. I really like Bruce Brown. Play Ben Simmons in the Bruce Brown role and just move on. Just go. Now, they had Harden at that point too, because they didn't have Kyrie. That's where it gets so messy, right? They've really only ever had 2 of the 3. Yeah, that would be my thing. Just take Simmons, see what else you can get, sort through it, and if you don't love it, retrade Simmons this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Move him on in another deal, this offseason and, reload around Durant and Kyrie that way. This is one of those ones where, like we said, it's just super unique that we're even having this conversation between two teams that could win the championship. And it's, 6 days from the trade deadline. Like that part is just, that's just mind blowing. Like that's not how this stuff goes down in general. All right, let's get into a couple more pieces of news here. Okay. So first one, this one kind of broke right after the trade happened, and you can get all our thoughts on that Portland Clippers trade in our prior show. There was a memo sent out to the team. Generally does happen right around trade deadline time because for future reporting, that the salary cap for next year, which had been projected rather at 119 million, is now going to come in, they think, at 121 million. That's really good news because we've been hearing ticket sales are down, ratings are down, all this stuff, right? We get all these doom and gloom reports. Well, if all those doom and gloom reports were true, the salary cap would not be going up. It would be, sticking at where they were at and, the minimal amount I'm supposed to raise. So that's big. What that is a jump of
like 9 million?
About 9 million. It's just over 112 million right now. So that's a jump of about 9 million. And that's not nothing, right? Mm-hmm. That's the 2 million bump on a projection. Generally the projections are a million, maybe 2 million. That's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this could, the bottom line is, and we'd have to go team by team to really look at, okay, what does this mean? What does this really mean for every team?
Sure.
But the bottom line is that this is significant. This is significant. Mm-hmm. This is something that will make a difference for some teams, maybe at the trade deadline, definitely during the off season. This will change what teams are able to do.
Yep.
And I think it's going to make things that much more interesting when you've got that much more, a little bit more flexibility to get things done.
Yeah. And if you're in a position where $121 million cap and that 2 million extra, it's also 2 million extra on the tax because that was projected at 145. It's now projected at 147. That can be the difference between, all right, we've got our full mid-level to use versus not. I mean, that's not a small number. So just something to keep in mind, as we look at this, that's just all around good news, for the, for the league and for, everything is if we're projecting more money, that tells me the league's just in a far healthier place than anybody is really kind of led on to.
Is it terrible that the first thing I thought of when this came out, the first team I thought of wasn't the Lakers? I have this picture in my head of Sam Presti laughing maniacally while saying, I can absorb how much more salary and get more picks?
Well, you know what though, my friend?
He's below the floor.
They don't project to be a cap space team next year, which is, I think, surprising to people. But they have the Shea Gilgeous-Alexander contract extension kicking in. They still have $27.4 million in dead money on the books for Kemba. They project to be an over the cap team next offseason, which is maybe a little surprising. Now let's see what happens over the course of the next 6 days here, and by the time we get to the draft and everything else. But just something to keep in mind, because they also project, I think, to have 3 draft picks as well, which that eats up your space pretty rapidly. So, and that's part of why having 35 million extra draft picks is probably not a workable solution, but that's a whole topic for another day that I can rant on later down the line.
Okay. Just crush my Sam Presti maniacal evil genius thing that I had going there, but that's okay.
Go listen to not the previous show, but yesterday's show when Trevor did Sam Presti's trade deadline outgoing message on his voicemail. That was better. I'm going to give you the props for that one. That was really good.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll take that then.
I'm here to lift you, man. I know you're feeling a little down about the state of basketball.
It's been a difficult last 18 hours or so. Let's say that for sure.
Hey, we already have people are reacting to our previous episode on Twitter and saying that this is a note I just got, laughing my ass off at Keith Smith NBA getting the Shams bomb live and screaming out, "Let's go." So check out our previous show, because I got if you ever had any doubt in your mind that I love this stuff, it all came pouring out right then in the middle of the show.
I'm gonna have to clip that or something, because if you ever, like, people think that we're just doing this, just we're cold or whatever, like we're just treating this as the numbers and this is just a job or whatever. No, we really are this into all of this stuff, and when stuff
Yeah.
happens, we get excited just like so many of you do.
Yeah,
So
we are not soulless
no.
robots who just do math. I can be at when I need to be, and I tend to live in a hyper realistic world about trades and signings and cap space. But this stupid silly league is the greatest thing in the world if you love drama, because it's so drama filled, and you get like actual games played on top of it. So it's like my favorite soap opera plus competition mixed in together. It's the best. I love it so much. Let's get into a bunch of other stuff, because Mark Stein, poor guy, drops his trade news thing, which is filled
Oh
with
yeah.
awesome tidbits, and it's like, here's a trade and Harden, and it gets blown out of the water. So let's get into this, because he's got a lot of really interesting stuff.
So let's start with the Wizards. Okay, the Wizards currently sitting in 11th in the Eastern Conference. Word is Montrezl Harrell, Thomas Bryant, and Spencer Dinwiddie, all available to various degrees. Bradley Beal, highly unlikely to be seriously discussed in the next 6 days, unless Beal goes to management and requests to be traded, which, according to Stein, has not happened yet. But they are a team that is in pursuit of a lot of players out there on the market right now. Jeremy Grant, Domantas Sabonis, all of these are all guys that they're trying to get in on to try to appease Bradley Beal, get him to stay, build a winner around him, all of those things. But the Wizards, I think, are going to be a very active team as we get to the trade deadline.
Agreed. I wonder if you're the Wizards, and if you're Beal, if you're looking at this Harden thing and saying, that might take a destination out of the mix for me. That might have been a place for me to go this summer. Maybe I do want to push this now. I don't think so, because I do believe they'd rather add around Beal than give it kind of give it one more run and see if we can find the right mix. But that's just something that kind of popped in my head after the Harden news this afternoon.
Yeah, agreed. And that could be something that comes back this summer. I mean, I don't think Beal is going anywhere anyway. I think this is just Beal putting pressure on the Wizards to get something done now, and I think they will. I think they're going to find something. Yeah. But I think it is an interesting insight, though. Like, is that now a landing spot not there for Beal, and does that then get Beal to stay or make it more likely that he stays? We'll see.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. We've got Stein, even though he suffered a shoulder injury, which looked bad, it looked like a shoulder separation. His arm was just kind of hanging after he did it. John Collins, this was at the end of a big win for the Hawks over the Suns. And I mean, it was one of those, he knew right when he did it, ran straight off the floor and into the locker room. But momentum was already building to suggest that he would not be dealt by the trade deadline. And now, obviously, a shoulder injury probably makes it that much more less likely, because teams typically don't want to trade for an injured player. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Hopefully the injury is not as serious as it looked and he's back soon. I haven't seen any recent updates on it, but sounds like John Collins likely to stay in Atlanta.
Yeah, he did post-game media, which, if it's super serious, that rarely happens with an injured player. Usually they don't want them to be out there in front of the media, because the first question, and every question is going to be, how are you feeling? Do you think you're going to be out? And all those things. And he answered a handful of those, but then they put him out there. So that's my guess, is they feel pretty good about that one. And I think the Hawks, they're 8-2 in their last 10. They're playing really well. He recently, like you said, snapped the Suns' 11-game win streak last night. Beating the Suns at any point is that's an accomplishment now. They're a really good team. So next team, Pelicans. We talked about it, I think, yesterday. They're being aggressive. They're trying to add to this roster. And then they CJ McCollum, Eric Gordon. And then this one was interesting. They are competing with teams that think maybe the Kings will move De'Aaron Fox, and that is kind of fun.
Yeah.
To think about there. If they could get De'Aaron Fox, that's kind of interesting. Fox, and because presumably Ingram sticks, so then you'd have Fox, Ingram, Zion, and that's your kind of 3-man package that then you build everything else around. That's fun. I can get behind that.
Yeah, Brian Windhorst also had them as being a team that's
Yeah.
very active on trying as a buyer, trying to
Yeah.
add players right now. So if they can land a De'Aaron Fox, that would be definitely fun for Zion Williams if and when Zion comes back. Fingers crossed.
Hmm.
We'll see.
I think Brian Windhorst, maybe I'm wrong, but I think he may have said on the Hoop Collective that they're the most likely team to make a
Hmm.
trade. Or they're the most active team at the deadline or something like that. So that's that again, something to keep an eye on there in New Orleans.
I thought this was really interesting about the Spurs, and we've talked all about how the
Yeah.
Spurs are loath to make moves at the trade deadline. Mark Stein saying in order to give up Jakob Poeltl, the Spurs would need a first-round pick and a quality player. With Jakob Poeltl, if you're not watching the Spurs, he's been fantastic this season, been very,
Hmm.
very good. So that's what they want, which is, I mean, it's a high asking price, but he's been good enough
Sure.
to where maybe it's not out of the
On a
question.
great contract
Yes,
too.
and that's obviously important. But I thought this was interesting too. The Spurs would be more open on moving Pirtle had Greg Popovich already broken the league's all-time record for coaching victories. Right now, he is 7 shy. So that would suggest there has to be some fear that if you make a bunch of moves right now at the deadline and you are still
Hmm.
7 wins shy, perhaps you don't get those 7
Yeah.
wins if you tear down enough of your roster. And then what happens with Pop? Like, what if the plan was for Pop to retire at the end of the season? Then what do you do? And so I think that's
And
got to be a
that's it.
factor too.
Yeah, that's the takeaway for me is he wants to get that record as he
Hmm.
should, and then is that it? And if you don't get it, what do you do? Go into next season 3 short and retire after two
Right.
weeks, and then walk like that's just not a thing. So yeah, that is that perked my ears up. Also, Chicago has put in interest on
Hmm.
Jakob Poeltl. That's kind of
It
weird
is.
because you already Vooch. Can't play them together. So I mean, yeah, you'd have 48 of the best center minutes in the best center minutes in the entire NBA, but that's a little weird. With that one, the Pacers, nothing really new here.
Hmm.
They're setting, continue to set high asking prices on Sabonis, Turner, and Levert. Rick Carlisle says, that Turner's the best rim protector on the planet. Rudy Gobert might have some say in there, not for nothing, but yeah, that is there. And then here in Orlando, nothing really new here, but Terrence Ross, Gary Harris remain available, and some teams are starting to look at Robin Lopez. But the Magic aren't super like, yeah, I got to move Lopez. They would if somebody wants to get silly and give them something really great, then they do it. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure that they're gonna make that get rid of Lopez. He's really happy here. They love his influence that he's been on
Hmm.
Wendell Carter and Mo Bamba.
And he loves Disney. So
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
it makes a lot of sense for him to be there. And
Oh,
look, if he's happy there and he's been a
universes.
positive influence, then maybe you just hang on to him. I do want to
Yep.
add in this, Keith. You talked about how much you love drama. I am waiting for on Twitter, Donovan Mitchell to go and like a post quoting Rick Carlisle saying that Miles Turner is the best
Yeah.
and the planet at protecting the rim.
Oh man, people find those. And I don't
Hmm.
even know how people find those. Like it's just weird.
But
Like
after the whole,
yeah.
Obviously Gobert, made his comments about Devin Booker's
Mhm.
defense, and it was seen as kind of a shot at Donovan Mitchell. I'm just waiting for him to go and like one of those posts, and then off we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, maybe. Yeah, nothing. I get surprised by
Hmm.
the NBA, so I don't want to say nothing surprising me, but yeah, it's like there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on in the league, and you almost have to expect
Oh,
it.
Keith, you got surprised mid-show.
Yeah, I mean that
Mid-show.
just
I
blew
did
me
too.
away. So yeah, that's why I didn't want to say nothing would
Hmm.
surprise me in the NBA anymore because stuff surprises me all the time. But yeah, I think that was
Yeah.
it for tidbits for Mark Stein. I'm cruising right now to see because it's got to be that time where you're kind of dialed into the tweet deck, and have it flown. But nothing new now. James Harden is out. We didn't talk about that. He's not going to play tonight for the Nets. So they ruled him out with hamstring soreness, which is a little interesting that he's, not going to play with an injury that we hadn't heard a whole lot about in recent times. We knew about the hand injury and that, so that is that's a little tricky. So I think that's kind of interesting. So yeah, it's I don't know. Let's see where this all goes. Joe Harris too met with the media from the Nets, basically said, hey, I'm trying, but gave no I'm going to be back. We talked about that already, that he may not make it back this year. So that's another question where we don't really know, where that'll go. So a lot of stuff. I mean, it's just, this is how it's going to be. Trevor mentioned it on our last show, but be prepared. You may get an episode or two over the weekend, because if stuff happens, we're going to be on it. We'll jump right on and we will be there. So, but yeah, I mean, we got, all kinds of fun going on now. 6 days till the trade deadline.
Good times to be had. Sleep will be lost. Deals will happen. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you guys are subscribing right here to the NBA Front Office Show. Turn on notifications on YouTube. And don't forget, if you are listening to the podcast version of this, follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. If we don't see you, have a great weekend. But I have a feeling, and I hope I'm not jinxing it here, but I have a feeling that we probably will see you this weekend. So till then, stay safe.